What's up, guys? Brady Figueroa coming at you with a review from the new Judicator album Concord, releasing just today, Friday, March 28th. This is definitely an interesting album for me to review because, I'm not the biggest power metal guy. A lot of times I just get turned off by the overall, emphasis on being so over the top, and as a result, kind of ending up being cheesy sometimes. But the reality is, if I'm in the right headspace, if I'm in the right mood, if I'm in the right scenery, oftentimes, like today, it was a beautiful sunny day out, I can still find myself enjoying some power metal, especially if it is a bit more riff-centric and not just blatantly focused on solely being so over the top. Essentially, there just has to be interesting musical ideas in order for me to really get into it, you know? And based on the two singles going into this album, I honestly wanted to review it. The first single, which was also the title track, has these kind of gang vocals that set the pace for the verses. It's got some opening kind of chunky riffing going on. A song like this, despite vocalist John Yellen's very, very power metal-esque vocals, is pretty enjoyable to me, just mainly because of the overall kind of riff-centric backbone. And I also really like the lyrics to this song, which to me kind of read like some social commentary on just the division in our country right now. Same with the intro track, Call Us Out of Slumber, which, I think the title in itself is a bit telling as far as the themes of this song. And this track is one of the more, straightforward power metal type songs on here, but I still am finding myself enjoying it, quite a bit. The way the song starts with those acoustic guitars and then those kind of flamboyant, distorted guitars get thrown on top. You get the bass drum just adding those punches that give that extra little touch of grooviness. And you get those grand lead guitars kind of leading the way into that kind of classic metal stomping type riff. But then the main riff kicks in and it's just this fucking double bass, steamrolling guitar riff that manages to have so much energy to it and some aggression even, but still have those kind of triumphant notes kind of spliced in. And then that bridge, which is just pretty much a montage of solos and riffs, end up just really pushing the energy forward in this song, which is, I can't ask for anything more from a guitar solo or a bridge section. Definitely a very strong way to start this album. Track 3, Johannah's Song 2, is another favorite of mine, especially after that 1-2 punch of Call to the Slumber, and then track 2, Sawtooth. This song's a bit more mid-tempo, and in the full album context, it allows the album to kind of give you a chance to breathe a little bit. That bouncy verse riff is definitely a big driving force behind this song that I enjoy. And even though lyrically there isn't a whole lot going on, and I'm not getting a clear narrative here as much as I was on the other two tracks I just mentioned, this is still overall a pretty enjoyable song. And I do like how John Yellen kind of sings a bit more in his lower register here, especially in the verses again, and doesn't kind of go too over the top with these vocals. Parts like this make him sound a little bit less faceless, I guess, just in the overall power metal scene. Parts of his vocals, in the lower register, kind of remind me a little bit of Scott Weiland. Mostly some of his more modern output, obviously before he passed, the Velvet Revolver records and that Art of Anarchy record he put out. I know that's kind of a random and obscure comparison because these bands are obviously completely unrelated. But I don't know, I thought it was worth bringing up, and I do think that it does make kind of his vocals on here sound a bit more unique and kind of bring something else to the table. And it's subtle moments like that in a power metal record that kind of get me coming back to it because it is a little bit something different. It's not just blatantly what I would expect from a power metal album. And kind of going off of that, I think my favorite overall parts on this album are those kind of more unconventional aspects in the overall power metal sound. Track 4, Miracle of Life, is by far my favorite track on here. For one, that opening riff channels a lot of thrash, especially Slayer a little bit, just in those melodies that are played. And even when the vocals kick in, despite them being in that same kind of style, they still, the song overall has this kind of more dark and downtrodden energy to it. In that, I guess, chorus section with the double bass behind it, you get those really echoey background vocals. They're not really woes, they're kind of ahs, I guess would be a good way of putting it. But again, just the darkness that's exhibited in those melodies. In the bridge, the riffing gets even more aggressive. You get a cool guitar solo in there, and then about 3/4 through the song, you actually get a saxophone part that I think is fucking sick. And then the song ends a bit more conventionally, just in the overall mood that it had established, but just parts like that, parts that all of the ones I just mentioned are, again, they keep me kind of second guessing on this album. And with power metal being such an overall genre that kind of is mood-wise a little bit one-dimensional at times, it's parts like this that add a lot to these albums. The closing track, Blood Meridian, is another track that I definitely have to give a salute to, especially with this track's drawn out length and multiple different moving parts. I think this track did a good job of having this long structure, but not feeling overextended or overdrawn or just long. Especially with the subdued intro and those synths that are in there. I think this song very much walks like a line between straight up power metal and just being a straight up progressive metal song. And as a huge music nerd, when I'm listening to any album that is clearly one subgenre and they start throwing progressive influences in there, I am all for it. Another very interesting track on this album for me, though, is the track Weeping Willow, which quite literally tells a story. I know this band kind of likes incorporating historical elements into the lyrics, so I'm not exactly sure like if this story actually corresponds to a historical event, but whether it does or not, I still like it. Essentially, the story is coming from the father's point of view as he's drinking whiskey with his son by the fire, and the son tells him that essentially he found his wife cheating on him with another man. And he said, "Hey, Father, what would you have done?" And the father, also the narrator, says, "Oh, I would have shot him dead." And then according to the story, I guess the son actually does go and shoot them both dead, and then he gets arrested, and essentially the father's saying, you know, his family tree is affected by this and how shameful he is. The overall dramatic nature of the music behind the song, like those kind of groaning lead guitar sections that come in at like the bridge, and those kind of chunky, droopy opening distorted guitars too, just that intro I think contributes a lot to those feelings. There's also those background synthesizers that are pushed just enough to highlight those certain parts without oversaturating the song or making the song feel overproduced. Overall, just another very well executed song, and very much like one that has a specific mood to it that overall kind of differs from the overall mood on the entire album, which does at times get a little bit monolithic, just overall being a strict power metal record. Going off of that, I also got to compliment the track Imperial, which immediately opens with some actual harsh vocals, which sound pretty good. Even though the lyrics on this song, especially near the end, do lean kind of like Christian metal a little bit, which is something that usually turns me off. I do appreciate the overall lyrical theme of this album, which is kind of in line with other things I've mentioned, just as far as kind of overall encouraging unity in the country right now, which is definitely something we need. In the overall grand scheme, that doesn't bother me, because the song itself is just, again, so full of energy, and it kind of has these kind of mood shifts, I guess would be a good way to put it, because with those harsh vocals and those kind of like more dark sounding guitars, the song definitely has some real dark elements to it. But then the chorus kind of has like these glimpses of hope with it and brightness, especially again kind of in those background vocals. Despite the dark lyrics, I don't know, this song is kind of like a big whirlpool of emotions, like bottled up in this little ball. I don't know, it's really interesting. The track Hold Your Smile opens with some acoustic guitars and overall somewhat of like a more folky atmosphere, especially in those quiet parts. But the song does end up being one of the more saturated ones, like in overall just harmonies, melodies, the synthesizers in the background. I again like the overall dramatic nature of this song, but this song is one example on here where it does get a little bit too oversaturated, at least for my taste. I think to kind of switch things up on the record at this point, this song should have just kind of remained in that subdued and calmer atmosphere, because I think it adds a lot to the album in that sense. Because when I first hit play on this song, I was like, okay, we're slowing things down. And I think these lyrical themes would have worked pretty well over, I don't want to call this an acoustic ballad if they did keep it more subdued, but just overall like a more folky, a more calm, a more atmospheric type song. They still could have kept the dramatic nature of the track, which the song, again, is very dramatic in its lyrics and its overall feel. But with it being so close to being the end of the album and these songs being decently long, like it ends up being a little overkill for me. And the only other track that I'm not really feeling on this album is track 2, Sawtooth. It's not a bad song, but in the full album context, I just feel like what they kind of went for on this track ends up being executed a lot better later on in the track list, and as a result, the song kind of ends up being a little forgettable. And this probably is the one song on here where the power metal over-the-top cheesiness does kind of wear on me a little bit, just in those lyrics. Holy land, wondrous land. And also mood-wise, there's just a lot less dynamics on this song as compared to other tracks on here. Like, this isn't a bad song at all. It just, for me, it's clearly one of the skippable ones. Yeah, overall, like, I'm definitely leaning positive on this album, which is saying a lot for a power metal record. For my personal tastes, as is always the case, or this is always just my personal tastes, I would encourage the band to maybe experiment more in slightly new directions. I think there's still a lot they can do while still staying true to the power metal sound. like maybe incorporate some more harsh vocals here and there. Maybe throw in like some heavier, more death or black metal influenced parts, do some odd time signature stuff, maybe go a little bit more progressive. And then on the other hand, like I was talking about on Hold Your Smile, maybe kind of go more stripped back for at least one track on here, just to give the listener kind of a chance to breathe a bit more. Can't remember if I said this already, but I think maybe a little bit more harsh vocals, because obviously we've seen that they can't execute them on here. I think doing a little bit more of that, I think would have been another cool direction this album could have gone in. At the end of the day, you can really only do so much in strictly power metal. So for me to make a power metal album interesting, it's got to kind of branch out a little bit. And this album does add parts, and I complimented those parts, but I think they could have done it a bit more. This album gets a 22 out of 30 for me. As always, thank you guys very much for watching. If you've heard this album, definitely comment your thoughts on it below. Remember to please hit the subscribe button for more rock and metal music related content. I got my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video. Until next time, again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.